Hello, everyone, wherever you are. In fact, just the panel is spread out from the United States to Brazil to the UK to Russia to Moscow and to Seoul. So somehow we managed to cover the whole world. This is an event. Welcome. This is an event that is co-sponsored by 5 universities in 5 different countries. I just mentioned it is the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. in the US, is the University of Campinas in Brazil. It's the University College London in the UK. It's the National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow. And of course, it is Seoul National University that has 2 representatives here rather than 1 as everybody else. I want to thank everyone. And before I start, I would like to say that the event is not only on Zoom, but because we had an overflowing crowd in terms of registrations, at least, there is a parallel streaming that is going on right now on YouTube. And I understand that there are more people there than they are here on Zoom. So there is a different group of people that is watching us and can actually interact with us later in the second hour when we have the questions and answers. So I will ask everybody, including myself, in a minute to mute themselves so that we can hear only the presenters and then the questions and answers. Please type your questions, and we have Guilherme Calvacante from the University of Campinas, who is going to be handling this part of the talk. So let me say a couple of words. This is the first of a series of 5 workshops that these five universities I just mentioned co-organize. The workshops are linked to a book, an edited book that is going to be published hopefully pretty soon, early next year, by Oxford University Press. The book is on the challenges of technology and economic catch-up in emerging economies, and it's going to be an open access book. So taking the opportunity, having a lot of the top experts in the world in their respective fields writing chapters for the book, we have invited people to participate in these workshops and give us short summaries of what they have, of their main arguments, and then discuss with the general public on these issues. So I am Nick Von Ortes. I am from the university, the George Washington University. I'm a professor of the Department of Economics there and director of the Institute for Science and Technology Policy. I also have a São Paulo Excellence Chair at the University of Campinas, and I managed to get myself into additional trouble and having an affiliation. I'm a leading research fellow at the National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow, the Institute of Statistical Studies and the Economics of Knowledge there. We have the way we have organized these workshops is following essentially the layout of the book. So today, in our first workshop, we have 5, the authors of 5 chapters represented on our panel. They have been instructed, each one, to keep it up to 10 minutes, their comments. And today's event is at the national level. So today we will talk about technology capabilities the impact of those capabilities on growth and on economic catching up in emerging economies. And today's discussion will be at the country level. In future workshops, the one that is coming up, for example, in December 3rd, we will go at the sectoral level. We will talk about sectors and so forth. Then we will move to companies early next year and so forth. You will see the announcement for the second will come out the next few days. So today, for today, we have a distinguished group of people on our panel. The first presentation will be given by Professor Jan Fagerberg. I think everybody in this audience know Jan. He has been writing on technology and growth for a long time. He is professor at the Center for Technology, Innovation and Culture at the University of Oslo in Norway. His co-author is Martin Srholec, who is Deputy Director for Research, the Center for Economic Research and Graduate Education in Prague. The second paper will be presented by Professor Slavo Radošević. No need to introduce Slavo. Everybody also knows Slavo. He's Professor of Industry and Innovation Studies at the University College London. He's at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies. His co-authors are Randolph.bruno and Kirill Osaulenko from the same university and the same unit. The third paper is going to be presented by Professor Jeon-Dong Lee. Professor Lee is again, does not need much introduction. Everybody should know him in this audience. He is Professor of Interdisciplinary Graduate Program on Technology Management, Economics and Policy. This is a Department of Engineering, Industrial Engineering at Seoul National University. Professor Lee is also currently serves as the advisor to the President of Korea, currently. His co-authors for this paper is Professor Chulgu Baek and Dr. Jung-In Yeon from Korea. The fourth paper will be presented by Professor Kyun Lee. Definitely nobody in this audience wants a long introduction of Professor Lee. Professor Kyun Lee is a professor at the Department of Economics of the same university in Seoul, Seoul National University. If you cannot place it somewhere, Seoul National University is basically the MIT of Korea. But Kyun Lee is very well known. He operates all over the world. He is one of the editors of Research Policy, which is the top journal in our field. Currently, he was a past president of the Schumpeter Society and so forth. So he will talk to us about leapfrogging. And finally, today we have Professor Vitaly Raud. Vitaly is the deputy head of the Institute of Statistical Studies and the Economics of Knowledge at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. And he is an economist of studying technological advancement. So these are the 5 papers. At the end, when they finish, we are going to invite, and I will introduce him then, Professor Alessandro Golubieski Teixeira. He is currently at the Tsinghua University in Beijing, in China. but he has many other distinctions. I will introduce them. Professor Teixeira is going to sort of give us. He has a very broad understanding of development in emerging economies, so he will give us his opinion about what he heard today for a few minutes. Okay, so without further ado, I think I want to open it up, and please let's go for the first presentation by Professor Fagerberg.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
And hear me. Perhaps we could get the presentation up. And here we are. Okay. So I'm happy to be able to present this paper by Martin Srholec and myself. And the topic of the paper fits squarely the topic of the book. It's about technology gaps and catching up. And so we are following a rather specific tradition, the tradition from Alexander Gerschenkron and Moses Abramovich, which points out that there is a scope for catching up by exploiting more advanced knowledge available elsewhere, but that this requires various efforts to succeed. These various efforts have in the literature, and we are following that, been called capabilities. And we distinguish between two types of capabilities: technological capabilities and social capabilities. So technological capabilities from Lindsay Kim and Sanjay Lal and onwards is the ability to identify, access, and exploit knowledge. While social capabilities are the kind of broader framework conditions, skills, governance, institutions, norms, and so on, that also are important for economic activity. Competitiveness, the third term in the title, it introduces trade. Often this perspective is introduced, just as having something to do with basic technological dynamics. But all economies in the world are open. They're open not only to knowledge, but also to trade. And so we develop a perspective on that, a model, following earlier contributions by Nicholas Kaldor and Anthony Thirlwall and so on. And this model leads to a reduced form, which is a kind of catching up equation, in which economic growth, catching up, is determined by the scope for catch-up, growth in capabilities, price competitiveness, and economic structure. These two first variables, scope for catch-up and capability growth, are well known from the literature. These two latter variables come in via the competitiveness model. We then apply this to nations, and that is the third term in the title of the paper, of which there are 114 between 1995 and 2030. Next, please. So, of course, one of the challenges here is to measure these various types of capabilities. So what we did was to look very widely for available indicators, all technological and social capabilities, and carry out a factor analysis. And in this way, three factors were identified, one of which we call technology and identified with technological capability, and three others which we identified with social capabilities. So that is education, governance, and the variables that we call empowerment. If you look a little bit more closely at this, there are something highlighted in yellow here, and that's where you have coefficients higher than 0.5. It's just for a matter of illustration. But when you look at that, you can see how the various factors correlate with the indicators. So for the technology capability variable or factor, it correlates very highly with scientific and engineering articles, patent applications, R&D expenditures, to some extent also with internet. The education variables correlates very highly with various indicators of education and enrollment at various levels. Governance correlates very highly with governmental effectiveness, lack of corruption, law and order, and so on. And finally, there are a number of variables that correlate with the ability of people to express their views, to organize, to take part in society, and so on. And that's why we use the empowerment term. Next, please. So here in this graph, we plot the technology variable that we calculate in this way. Initial level towards this change. And in this way, 4 different quadrants emerge. So up to the right in this figure, we have countries with an initial high level of technology, which also grows fast. So these are the countries that are moving ahead along this dimension. And down to the left, we have those that start out with a very rather low level, and that also grow less than other countries. I mean, their technological capability grows less than other countries. So these are the ones that are falling behind. And as you can see, most of the observations are in the moving ahead and falling behind category. So this means that this variable it's the opposite of convergence, it's divergence that we can see here. The highly developed, the highly capable countries, they forge ahead, while those that are at a very low level tend to fall behind. Next one, please. Here we have exactly the same figure for education and with the same quadrants and so on. And here you see a different pattern. Here you see that there is most of the observations are in the what we call the losing momentum and the catching up quadrants. So here there is a much higher degree of convergence across countries in this on this variable. Next, please. And here we have the third capability indicator, which has to do with aspects of governance that are important for economic activities and catching up. And here we see exactly the same pattern as in the previous graph. We see that most of the observations are in the losing momentum and catching up quadrants. So there is a clear tendency here towards convergence over time. That is, countries that start out with rather not so well developed systems of governance, they tend to catch up over time. Next one, please. And this is our final variable. And here you can see that the observations are all over the place. So here there is no systematic tendency in a divergent or converging dimension. Next. So what we then do is to use these variables that we have calculated for technological and social capabilities and put them into this reduced from growth model that I mentioned earlier. And so what we have here is the result of a regression analysis on data from the 114 countries for which we were able to assemble relevant indicators in the time period 1995 to 2030.
Jan, a couple of more minutes if you can conclude. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so let me just briefly say that so what we have here, the first variable is the gap variable, then we have the changes in the various capabilities, and then we have these other dimensions that I mentioned, namely change in price competitiveness and demand, economic structure. So basically we can say that most of these variables are highly significant, and that goes for all of the different versions of the model that we include here. The exception is the empowerment variable, for which we do not really find any support, and price competitiveness, which does not seem to matter much either. We also do various tests, robustness tests for inclusion of other variables and so on. That does not change the impact of any of these variables to a significant extent. And as you can see, the explanatory power of the model is quite large. Next one, please. Next, please. Yes. So coming out to the conclusion, what we show is, first of all, that the potential for catch-up matters. And if you can read the papers, you can see, for example, that this matters a good deal, for example, for the relatively high growth of countries from sub-Saharan Africa in this period. But that this needs to be matched with capability building, both for the technological and social kind. Improving technological capabilities seems to be particularly important for the Asian tigers and for other developed countries. So in the model, this explains the relatively fast growth of Korea and other similar Asian catch-up countries to a very large extent. While, for example, Eastern European countries benefit from improved governance, which is an important part of their ability to catch up in this period, has to do with that. And changes in price competitiveness is, as I already mentioned, of minor importance. So this was the paper in 10 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I am sorry, Jan. This is a great paper. I hope I invite actually all the audience to go read the actual chapter. It's really rich and excellent. And of course, we can discuss with Professor Fagerberg at the end. Now, let's move forward to the next paper by Professor Slavoj.
Thank you, Nick. I hope you can see the presentation. Yeah?
Yes.
We can. Okay. I'm very sorry for problems on our side because one of my co-authors, randolph.bruno, was supposed to present it, but he got stuck with the doctor with scanning things. And I hope he will show up during this presentation and maybe also answer some questions. And also the other co-author, Kirill Osaulenko, is here for any discussion afterwards. This presentation builds nicely on Jan's because Jan's painted or explored with Martin a broader picture where technology capabilities are put into the social context, institutional context. In our case, we go really on technology only. We are kind of ignoring institutional aspect, not because they are not important, but exactly they're too important to be dealt in a comprehensive way as they have managed to do it. So we, in this chapter, we try to develop further a concept of technology upgrading in emerging economies. This is something which I have been working with colleagues before, and we have kind of developed a metrics of technology upgrading, which is a kind of multidimensional framework, which comes simply because of dissatisfaction with the conventional indicators like R&D, which you apply to emerging economies, or total factor productivity, which are kind of not very informative. In the context of middle income trap, that's even more important. So all that kind of is trying to build a kind of broader understanding of innovation, where in one concept you try to capture three essential dimensions of the technology upgrading. These three dimensions, they are basically, we published already some of these things, so maybe for some of you, maybe it's not entirely new. These three dimensions are intensity of technology upgrading, by which we mean different type of capabilities, starting from production capability, R&D capabilities, technology capabilities. Second is the breadth of technology upgrading, because any process of growth and technology catching up is also a process of structural change. It's difficult to capture it, but we have some framework how to do it. And finally, no country is catching up without being engaged into global economy in different ways. Of course, there are different models in the past, but this is important dimension. The novelty here is that we try to capture it within one framework, which you will be surprised gives quite new kind of insights, which are not possible if you take these indicators individually. So this is in a nutshell kind of three dimensions of technology upgrading. You can see on top technology intensity, which has these three components: structural features, which includes infrastructure, then knowledge diversification, which is something which we picked up to a large extent from the work on Kun Lee, who basically shows nicely the diversification in terms of knowledge and patterns that he explores. And then we add up this technology and knowledge exchange in that context. Our empirical part is, in this stage, quite restricted. We take 16 countries. Now we are working on an extended sample. It's entirely data and problem. And here we include China, India, South Africa. So we include BRICS, including Brazil. Then we take the range of Central East European countries, which follow very different patterns, starting from Russia and Hungary on the other side, this kind of assembly economy. And then we have countries which are kind of South Korea as a beacon of catching up, Israel as a kind of R&D driven economy, and then Germany and Spain as a reference for many East European countries. So just a few kind of basic things around the index. This is a composite index where I cannot go into individual indicators of each of these components. I hope you will have a chance to read the book. Finally, that's why we fight so strongly to have open access. So when you do this conventional kind of composite indicators, then you get this relationship between the levels of income and index, which are kind of positively related, which is nicely and encouraging. Then you get, on the other hand, on the horizontal is this index of intensity of technology upgrading, and then on the vertical is the structural changes. And you see that there is a much more homogeneity in terms of structural features than it is in terms of technology intensity, which means that the same structural features maybe are similar, but generate very different levels in terms of technology upgrading and levels. When you take into account the knowledge exchange, then relationship is not very consistent. And that is because of the different modes of integration of economies in global economy. We have only one assembly economy, let's call it Hungary. We could take Malaysia or some other in the future work, but you would see that this would be even further kind of extended because of the different modes of integration and the fact that different modes do not necessarily lead automatically to technology upgrading. When you compare the intensity of technology upgrading and the breadth, then there is a positive relationship. However, when you compare that index of intensity and structural change with the integration into global economy, then you see basically that there is no clear relationship. The novelty of the paper is in that we wanted to make a kind of communication with, let's call it mainstream economics, in the sense that conventional economies, when they think about technology, they think about the total factor productivity, they think about labor productivity kind of. So we decided then, of course, it's very limited sample. I know this will be one of the first complaints, but I'm telling you, this is simply first stage of the work, but still very, very indicative. then we try to test the relationship between our index and different components of that index to total factor productivity and labor productivity. I will not go now into the things of how this is done, but this is also quite conventional, the composition of that. The main point here is that when we test this relationship between total factor productivity and individual components, then we can see clearly which of our components are strongly correlated to total factor productivity and labor productivity. So in a sense, my argument with a kind of standard economic approach would be, yes, maybe you can say something about the technology in general, but we can tell you what is behind then total factor productivity or labor productivity. So here we have a kind of regression where dependent variable is a total factor productivity, and you see that we here have individual components. We have this intensity, we have a breadth of or structural change, and then we have integration into global economy, knowledge exchange. And you see that the total factor productivity is not related to this index, but the intensity and structural change is related. On the side of productivity, it is only structural change which is related. Then when we try to see...
Slavo, 1 or 2 more minutes, please.
Yeah, I'm 7 minutes now. I'll be well in time. I have in front of me.
Okay, great.
So when we look at the further subcomponents, then we can see that among the different subcomponents, actually, there is a strong relationship between total factor productivity and production capability. And this is maybe something which is quite surprising from one perspective, but from our perspective within this framework where many of the emerging economies are growing based on the production capability, not on technology capability, that is not the surprise. I'll not go further into these results, but the point is I want to summarize, because this is simply to motivate you to read the chapter. The basic idea is that our analysis showed that this index is strong correlated with income level of the economies, but also I didn't have time to go into these different patterns of different countries. And there is a very rich picture which emerges how different countries follow their specific patterns. Korea and China are the only economies which have improved on all 3 subcomponents, which in a sense confirms our intuition, while Brazil, unfortunately, is the only economy which has fallen behind on all 3 subcomponents. Between these 2 extremes, we find a variety of countries, a variety of different situations, which are very interesting and policy relevant. And final point, we show in this small econometric exercise that the index can significantly contribute to explain the changes in both total factor productivity and in labor productivity. And the interesting thing that this index, which is the index of exchange with the global economy, doesn't have explanatory power by itself, which in a sense, for some of you, maybe is not surprising, which suggests that the openness towards technology exchange by itself will not contribute to increased TAP, unless, of course, is complemented by own technology accumulation capability. So in a sense, this goes very much along the line that Jan had painted, where the kind of technology gap and technology accumulation approach, once again, I would say, show its relevance in the context of understanding catching up. I think I'm just in time. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent, Slavo. Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, very interesting chapter for people to read, and it's following up. And the third presenter, Professor John Dong Lee, now will talk to us about the middle innovation trap. Don't confuse it with the middle income trap. He's talking about the middle innovation trap, and I think he will follow up on this discussion. Professor Lee. Maybe you are muted. We don't hear you.
Here. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, everything okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a good chance to share my idea. So I'm also trying to maintain the main missions our two great authors presented already. Technological capability at the national level. Here, our main argument is that when we are talking about national level total technological capability, we need to maybe tell the difference between implementation capability and design capability as components of total national capability. So our main mission is to show the middle income trap, so-called, is the result of middle innovation trap, which is defined by the failure of the transition of the main components of technological capability from implementation to design capabilities. So this diagram is the summary of my main message. Horizontal axis shows the GDP per capita, and along the line, we can identify the middle income trap. But vertical axis shows the technological capability, total technological capability, consisting of two different types of capability, implementation and design. So as one country starts its economic development process by having implementation capability based on imported design from advanced countries. And a country, as a country develops step by step, the country can have a capability to make its own design. But if the country fails to change its main components from implementation to design, then it will experience stalled economic growth. So in order to do that, we need to, I wanted to provide a conceptual framework to support those two components of capabilities, and I wanted to provide some empirical evidence. So as a start for the conceptual framework, we all know that economic growth can be made only by accumulating national level technological capability, but here we need to focus on the components of national technological capability. Here, based on the knowledge management literature and organizational learning, and also based on the evolutionary economics focusing on routines, we identified implementation and concept, the design capabilities. And those two capabilities can affect economic growth at different stages. So here, this table shows the key differences between implementation design capabilities in terms of mode of expression and performance criteria and strategies to nurture and time and cost to acquire that capability. You can see, but I wanted to emphasize just one feature, strategies to nurture. So in order to obtain implementation capability, we need to accumulate the repetitive execution. But in order to have a design capability, we need to accumulate creative try and error. So as an empirical study, we try to measure the level of national level of total technological capability consisting of two capabilities, implementation and design capabilities. And we also apply the principal component analysis and to identify each individual survey indicators behind implementation and design capabilities, as you can see here. And we obtained the data sets for 101 countries from 1996 to 2016. 20 years, about 100 countries. And national technological capability consists of two parts, implementation and design. And this graph shows the trend of capability development for implementation capability against total national technological capability on the left-hand side, and right-hand side, the development of design capability against national technological capability. If we combine these two, then we can get these pictures. So left-hand side, as you can see, in a very early stage of economic development, when the national technological capability is very low, implementation capability takes a bigger role than design capability. But at some point, you can see the main role had changed from implementation to design. So here, this point is the transition stage, we called. So transition will start from less than 2 to up to 3 in terms of total technological capability. And if we calculate the share, the relative share between these two, then in the very early stage, the implemented capability is taking a bigger share, as you can see here. And if we plot the data with two axes of national technological capability and a vertical axis, and GDP per capita on the horizontal axis, as you can see, all different countries' performance. And here, the developed pattern would look like a non-linear shape. So between 2000 to 3000, or a little bit less than 2000 to 3000, national technical capability may not change in terms of trend. And based on our analysis, we found out that before that, implementation capability plays bigger role. And after the transition, design capability plays a bigger role. And so based on our analysis that has been contained in the chapter, we can conclude that securing design capability successfully across the transition stage is a sufficient condition to overcome the middle income trap. So we went to maybe show the reasons why it's so difficult to make a successful transition from implementation to design capability. Maybe the most important explanation came from the concept of past dependency. So the one country is stocked and very good at implementation, and then they, as an inertia, they wanted to invest more and more, focusing on implementation capability. So in the last part of my chapter, I wanted to suggest some policy implications. So in order to make a successful transition based on some qualitative analysis, we provide these 4 policy agenda as industrial innovation policy: strong and advanced manufacturing base, and learning capability to nurture professionalism, means human research development focusing on try and error, and also social cultural institutions to favor the accumulation of try and error, and consistent innovation policies to move across the transition period successfully. And this is my conclusion. So we try to make an answer to these questions. Can we measure the capabilities as components, implementation and design capabilities? Yes, we provide it based on composite index analysis. And does the implementation capability precede design capability? Yes, based on our Granger causality test, we found out that implementation should come first, and then later design capability would come later. And can we identify the transition period of technological capability? Yes, we identified, and then if we interpret that transition period in terms of GDP per capita, we can say that transition should start from around 10,000 and then at least up to 30,000, the transition should finish. And are the effect of two capabilities on economic growth different for each stage of economic development? Yes. In the very early stage, implementation capability, and later design. So, for example, the policymaker in developing countries should focus more on high-tech but implementation capability first. Do countries in the middle income trap suffer from the transition failure? Yes, we analyzed this issue and we identified the close relationship between transition failure and middle income trap. That's all I wanted to talk today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. This is, I want to say this is an excellent chapter. I actually think that you have done in 10 minutes. It was not fair to present this very complicated analysis, but there is a lot behind it. I invite everybody to look at the chapter. Let's pass directly to yet another Professor Lee, but a very different one, Professor Kuhn Lee from the Department of Economics of Seoul National University. You will talk on leapfrogging.
Thank you. Nice to see all of you through this Zoom-based meeting. My chapter in the book is about leapfrogging. I guess most of you are familiar with this concept. So my chapter is somewhat updated overview of that concept. Okay. So I guess many of you know that this origin of this term leapfrogging, which is first proposed in Perez and Sote's chapter article. They talk about leapfrogging and windows opportunity. And they say that when there is a change in technical paradigm, there's a time for latecomers try leapfrogging and taking that moment of time as a window opportunity in the sense that new innovations are emerging. Okay, so example is that for Korea, the Windows opportunity was rise of digital technology. Thereby Korea kind of leapfrog ahead of Japan into digital-based product. So I would say conceptually leapfrogging can be defined as latecomers doing something new ahead of forerunners or incumbent. So thereby they may leap over the incumbent. So in my recent book, I argue that even if ladder is kicked away, as Hajun mentioned, but there are still ways for latecomers to catch up, and that is the fly on a balloon, which is leapfrogging. So you don't need a ladder because you have a balloon, which is leapfrogging. Okay. So this is one key message of the my talk. And why we need a leapfrogging? Because as you get close to the frontier, wing beyond or middle income stages, you will find difficult to get technology transfer from incumbent or high income countries. So you have to do something on your own. Okay. So that's another way to overcome IPR barriers, intellectual property rights. So many emerging or high-tech technology are protected by IPR owned by incumbent. So leapfrogging is a way to go over that barriers by doing something different ahead of incumbent. This way, we can also avoid direct competition with the incumbent. Okay. So in this gram, I often show that when you say there are 3 generations of technology, you can skip generation 1 or 2, but jump into generation 3 ahead of incumbent who are still using generation 2. Okay. But there is a risk because when you try emerging technology, they are often unstable, not that reliable. So you might end up lower than low productivity than incumbent. So you might make losses. That's what happened to Tesla and others. Okay, so when you try leapfrogging, you might have to go through some period of loss making initially. Only you overcome that period, you'll get the market. So there's leapfrogging comes with risk and potentials. And also we can compare this idea with long jump by Hidalgo when they talk about product spaces. And long jump is more like intersectoral leapfrogging. They try to jump to new product spaces. That's very risky. But our concept leapfrogging is more like intrasectoral leapfrogging. You jump into new generation technology with the same sectors. So that's less difficult than long jump toward different sectors. But you have to build up sector-specific capabilities. That's the wing. Without wing, you cannot fly out of windows. You might fall through the windows. So wing is something like building sector-specific capabilities before you try leapfrogging. The concept of product space, they don't have much discussion about entry barriers or competition incumbent. Not every space is feasible for latecomers to enter. That's why leapfrogging tried to overcome this entry barrier by trying something new or something ahead of incumbent. But with the care about two risks, which is how to choose, make among those alternative technologies, and how to create initial market. Often, if you go into the market too early, there is no consumers. Okay? And when to try leapfrogging, not every day, but on a good weather. Then, because you are flying on a balloon, you cannot fly a balloon every day. You have to wait for good weather. The good weather is time for paradigm shift or time that new radical innovation happening. Okay, so leapfrogging has higher chance of success when you try it only during specific moment of time or shifting period with the emergence of new technology. Okay, so in our special issue from research published with Franco Mallerba, we have a special issue on catch-up cycle. And we examine the leadership change in several sectors like cell phone, memory, camera, jet, and steel, and so on. We found that many cases leapfrogging has a role in these leadership changes. Okay, so leapfrogging are not sufficient condition, but when you look back, successful cases of leadership change by latecomers all tend to involve some variation of leapfrogging. In the sense, it is very strong necessary condition. Okay, so we find there are several variations of leapfrogging. Stage skipping, you skip some vintage of technology, or you can create really new radical industry innovation ahead of incumbent, or you don't have to do that. You just adopt somebody else's innovation ahead of incumbent and try some more follow-on innovation, more adaptation, improvement. That's also leapfrogging as long as you try earlier than incumbent. Okay. So this is chart showing the several variations of leapfrogging. First, compare with the path of incumbent. You can talk about stage skipping or path creating leapfrogging. And in terms of within the path creating leapfrogging, you can see two things. One is follow-on innovation. The other is radical innovation. Okay. And also we can distinguish inter versus intrasectoral leapfrogging. Intra means within the same sector, but different across generations, less risky. Intersector means like similar to long jump, is more risky because you're moving into new sectors. Okay, so we can, these are several conceptual variation of leapfrogging strategy. We can also talk about in terms of different types of company apply different leapfrogging variation. First, we can compare distinguish startup versus incumbent. Incumbent has leaders, follows laggards. In this context, we can say for startups, they typically try path creating leapfrogging, or often follow innovation or business model innovation. Among the incumbent followers, even if you have a certain experience and observative capacity, you might want to try stage skipping leapfrogging, but with some risk in mind. For laggard, you should build capability first before you try leapfrogging. Or you can try upgrade by moving into higher end segment. Okay, so in this sense, we can talk about latecom's advantages 2.0. 1.0 is traditional one, like you can invest mature capital without paying for R&D cost. But in terms of advantage 2.0 means that you can try new business model innovation, adopting Industry 4.0 technology without paying for that R&D cost. This is a business model-based innovation. But it could be still leapfrogging. Okay.
Professor Lee, maybe 1 or 2 minutes?
Yeah, 1 or 2 minutes, okay. So one example is a startup in Indonesia. It's called eFish company. This company combined IoT technology with the traditional fish farming. In fish farming, difficult is how to feed fish efficiently. Sometimes you feed too much, sometimes you feed too little. With IoT, you can do it very efficiently. Okay, this is one of the most successful startup in Indonesia. Okay, so it runs one of the top 3 the unicorns. So this example of leapfrogging, combining new Industry 4.0 technology applied in the traditional business areas. Okay. So lastly, we can talk about 2 different incumbent track concept. We used to talk about incumbent as an advanced economy vis-a-vis emerging economies. But we can also talk about in terms of company types. So in other words, there are incumbent, but there are many startups which utilize these new windows. Okay. So as you know, we are now living in the paradigm shift period, new energy revolution or fourth industrial revolution or 4.0. So this best time to try leapfrogging is happening to many emerging countries. Okay. So we can try also in terms of environmental leapfrogging, in other words, moving into new technology, which is more environmental friendly. Thereby, we can avoid too much damage to Earth or environment. Okay. So I think that's it. Thank you. Obrigado. Okay.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Professor Lee. In fact, there will be in our 3rd workshop early next year, we are going to talk about the environmental aspect of leapfrogging, as you said right at the beginning. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. And I will move directly to our last presenter, Professor Raut from the Higher School of Economics. Vitaly?
Yes, thank you for this fantastic opportunity. So I'm going to present very briefly some key points from the chapter. I hope you will have chance to read it. I'm continuing this line of, let's say, empirical studies of process of technological upgrading and catch up. And the point of the chapter is to draw the attention to some broader sources of evidence which could be useful for the scholars and for the practitioners. The whole insight we are having from respected authors, many of them are now with us in this workshop, is that actually the technological upgrading story is very much gets more and more complicated. We are moving from this standardized and straightforward logic that was kind of popularly associated with the technological upgrading in 80s, let's say. Now it is quite clear there is no unified pathway. It is highly diversified, and different countries at different stages of development have to pursue very different opportunities, right? All in all, if we get through the growing evidence, the point is that the upgrading is very much about developing the country's abilities to innovate, right? So the innovation capabilities are considered more and more central to this discourse. However, the question is, how do we measure innovation capabilities? We are quite good at measuring actually the success of technological upgrading, right? We have this economic measures, we have some broader top-level measures. When we are talking about the capabilities measurements, the innovation capabilities, we rely on different sorts of proxies. And this is not bad. This is the process rewarding, as we saw from fantastic empirical chapters that we have just listened. However, the, let's say, world of computational social sciences we are living promises that we can improve our metrics of technological, let's say, of our analysis, and basically one point is that this story of technological upgrading sometimes develops in parallel with the development of innovation studies. If we look at the contemporary frameworks to capture innovation processes, we see innovation and innovation capabilities is extremely diverse and multiform process, which combines not only this formal R&D driven abilities to construct something new to the world market, but also something of imitation and technological adoption, which is particularly essential for the catching up countries, right? Also, there is a strong point which is known as high-tech myopia, when practitioners are often biased to look at only at the fancy high-tech industries associated with this catch-up and technological upgrading and ignore others. Innovation surveys, a facility developed quite for some time, actually help to overcome many of the myths in the innovation studies, and maybe it's time when they can serve to the discussions of technological upgrading as well. No need for a long introduction of the Oslo manual framework. One of the key points is that the contemporary contemporary innovation surveys integrated into the national statistics provide very flexible opportunities. However, as most of the scholars know, the potential for using aggregate metrics from innovation surveys has certain limitations. Many of them are of technical character, but also there are something not that simple with interpretation of the results. On the other hand, there are opportunities which open from the rich practice of microdata analysis. In many countries, microdata on innovation surveys is publicly available. In this chapter, I illustrate that actually this firm level microdata-driven indicators may help us to construct some useful metrics for technological upgrading. So based on the surveys, based on the questions available in the standard innovation survey questionnaire, we can construct, we can classify firms at the firm level according to their level of technological capabilities, of innovation capabilities. Whether they are able to present something new for the global market, are they focusing on delivering something new only at the national scale, or are they imitating, or are they passive, more or less passive technology adopters? So this is the output-based innovation modes classification. It has been used for some time, but mostly for the cross-country benchmarking. However, if we apply this classification to the population of firms and try to understand the long-term trends which emerge from this firm-level classifications, we can come to an interesting facilities that help us to understand the process of technological upgrading, whether the country is accumulating innovation capabilities or not. So here, this chart shows the proportions between different classes of enterprises, different levels of innovation capabilities across 16 years. And we can see that for Russia, for the case of Russia, it's quite stable. However, there is a certain dynamics. For example, the share of passive technological adopters is actually crowding out these international global innovators. which is a sign of decreasing innovation capabilities to some extent. We could do this exercise in the more specified way. We can go down to the sectoral level. We can try to find the states of the industry level innovation capabilities. How do we do that? We classify industries according to what are the most common strategies found within this sectors, right? And the cluster analysis effort here helped to identify 5 different types of industries, right? So some industries which really have a smaller fraction of innovation companies of any type. There are non-innovative, then the barely innovative state when there is somewhat more innovating firms with a special focus on technology adoption, modestly imitative, broadly imitative, actively innovative. So basically 5 levels of industrial capabilities. And we can trace the industries, right? So this is the numbers as the industry code, so using the NACE specification. How did the industries travel on this horizon of 16 years between different levels of innovation capabilities? Interesting point is that this trend is not always upward, right? So it's not only about technological upgrading, it's not only about upgrading the innovation capabilities, but some industries actually were losing their momentum compared to other industries, right? So the fraction of actively innovative industries is rather small. One interesting observation here that actually we can say that somewhat the process of innovation capability growing actually happened in Russia because many industries traveled from the non-innovative state to the barely innovative state. Okay, I skip these details due to the limited of time. Yes.
If you can give us your conclusions.
Yes, so that's what exactly I'm planning. So an important point is that actually this instrument helps us to highlight the importance of addressing different types of innovation strategies, because actually the field of innovation strategies pursued by the firms is heterogeneous, right? And many governments in many cases have this, let's say, blind spot. They focus on some specific types of behavior, but they forget about different types of behavior, like this barely innovative modes. And this actually ends up in a bias in terms of focuses of their innovation policies, because sometimes the measures they are proposing actually would not have the proper targets, proper respondents, because of absence of such strategies in the field, right? So that's one of the main points. Some generalizable points here, right? We are moving towards this computational science of technological upgrading eventually. We are finding better metrics for exploring this mechanics of what happens with firms, with the specific actors. So innovation service is one example. Other examples of firm level metrics of heterogeneous types could be found in different business surveys, or maybe in the patent data, but definitely this is the way how to treat such complex things as path dependence and try to capture something which is often referred in the literature as bounded change, when we are looking at the gradual improvement, right? So I think that's the main points. I invite you to address the chapter.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I also do advise that they read this chapter, because you make this leap forward from micro to macro data that is very interesting. To complete the presenter's side, we have invited actually a renowned economist, international development economist. He is Professor Alessandro Golombiewski Teixeira. He is one of the 1,000 talents of China today. He has been at the University of Tsinghua for several years now, since actually he left the Brazilian government. He is advising China on several of the major projects that are going on there. And before going to China, and the reason he got to 1,000 Talents Award is that he served for several years, from 2003 to 2016, in senior positions in one of the BRICS, Brazil, the B of the BRICS, right? Brazil. So he was Minister of Tourism. He was Deputy Minister of Development, Industry and Foreign Trade. He was President of the Brazilian Agency of Industrial Development and of the Brazilian Export and Investment Promotion Agency. He was chief economist of the presidency of Brazil, and so forth. So this is a person who has worked. He's a graduate of SPRU at the University of Sussex with his PhD. So he has a wide experience of what is happening across many of the countries that are developing fast. So I would like to invite him to give us some of his experiences and some as they relate to the presentations that we heard today. Professor Teixeira.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to be very brief, okay, very quickly on this, because I think the good part of the seminar is the interaction. We have many people there with very interesting point of views. First thing, what I got, I didn't have time yet, but I will read the chapters. But I think that is one of the important elements that I see throughout your presentation, is that we have a convergence of the different works that we have here about the importance and the national technological capabilities within the catching up in process, okay? Especially when we take, as Professor Slavo highlighted, the three different dimensions of technological upgrade and technological catching up, okay? That's my first comment. The second comment is clearly, I think, is obviously for everybody that capability building is one of the key elements of technological upgrade, okay? And that comes to other two observations that is observations but questions, okay? When Professor Jan Fagerberg mentioned that the capability building is one of the key determinants of the technological upgrading, Professor Dong mentioned about the innovation middle trap and the importance of innovation policy in forward to search, to improve and to get out of this innovation middle trap. But the question is, okay, let's go to another side. How policies play in this, okay? We know that we have human development in human resources policy, we have social control of the institutions, okay? But, okay, how we do this, how we take it from the theory to the practice, especially for the examples that we saw in the work of Kun Lee about the fourth industrial revolution and the leapfrogging. We see that as a window of opportunity, but without the implementation of policies, especially in developing countries, this will not be. In fact, we're gonna, using the technologies that Vitaly just mentioned, we're gonna increase the gap, okay? So we see that. So my point here, Nick, is that I understand that we have a pretty much a long-term discussion in terms of capabilities, measuring capabilities, how you build capabilities. It's a tough area because we have different levels of capabilities, okay? And they are unities, and measuring them is not easy because some of them are process, so it's difficult to measure them. But my question is how we incorporate that to the national level policies, okay? I pretty much know quite well industrial innovation policies around the world, okay? And I see with a very pessimistic eyes, especially the later adoption of industrial innovation policies on the capability side. I know in the academia, in theoretical, we talk a lot about capability building, technological upgrading, technological capability, but when you are down to the instruments that make this possible is getting harder and harder and harder. As Vitaly just mentioned, okay, how you take this and you incorporate at the sectorial level and the firm level is a challenge. So my point here, for concluding my observation, Nick, is how do you work more policy-oriented to try to help the nations to acquire and to build and to develop, I would say, capability building process that can impact on industrial level and firm level. Okay, Nick? I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandro. This was an excellent comment. And in fact, I think we can keep this for the rest of all the workshops as we move from the country level to the firm level. This is a great question. So he's asking about how to implement all these nice things that we have. I think we will open it for discussion. I want to invite all the panel members, those who want to comment, to start commenting on this question. Who wants to go first?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe this is the right question, but probably we can answer it fully only on the last workshop, because we have a also section of the book that deals with the policy issues. But absolutely right, we have to address it now, and we will be addressing it all the time, you know, basically throughout this series of workshops. My personal take on that would be that we are now also in the same as Kirill pointed, that we are now kind of in a transition period, new opportunities, window opportunity. We know that also policy philosophies are changing. So now we have this, we passed this period where the advice of structural reforms are sufficient and you don't have to do anything. Now we have a revival of industrial policy, and so kind of it becomes back in fashion. The issue is whether, you know, the same mistakes will be done as in the past and what we have learned in this period. So I think we can have maybe some fruitful discussion what have been learned in this period, and whether the new technology industrial policies are just a kind of attempt to repeat things from the past, or they are qualitatively different. My argument would be that they are qualitatively different, and they have to be qualitatively different. But I'm happy to leave it here just as a point for further discussion.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else from the panel?
May I?
Of course.
Yes, okay. Well, yes, well, I think these were Teixeira, he outlined some very good questions. And of course, how can this capability concept, these ideas that we discuss, be adapted to policy? How can policy usefully build on this work? And then I think there is one thing that is very important, and maybe it's obvious to him, but and that is that that is very much dependent on context. So for the great majority of countries in the world that want to benefit from foreign technologies and technology gap and upgrade their economic structures and so on, there are these more basic capabilities that was called here implementation capabilities, I believe, but that Lin So Kim, for example, called the production capabilities. They are of crucial importance. So we can, and to forget these more basic capabilities would be wrong, I think. So it all depends. I mean, there's no way you can address this problem without having a good analysis of the context of the country in questions into which these capabilities should be used. So, and I think one of the great mistakes one can do here is, in a way, to think that hey, there is something out there that are called very advanced innovation capabilities or whatsoever, and we also need some of that. But capabilities at a national level and in firms is something that has to be developed gradually.
Okay, yeah, it's a great idea. You want, Jan, you have more? I thought you finished.
Yes, I can add one more thing, because I think Vasily, he brought up a very relevant point. And that is that innovation policies of various kinds can sorry for that. Innovation policies of various kind actually can help firms to improve capabilities. And the public sector, in a broad sense, can engage public firms to solve problems that they are facing, and that can help shifting the level of capabilities to more advanced capabilities that also are domestically developed. So there is an important role here for the state and for public policy in supporting such capabilities, especially advanced capabilities.
And who is better positioned to talk about that than Professor Lee and Professor Lee? Both Kuhn and JD are the best people to talk about this issue, right? Do you want to address it?
Very right question. It's always very difficult, but we need to tackle that issue. How can we implement these beautiful ideas into practical policy-making process? And I went to utilize the arguments I made during my presentation. Recently I focused very much on the design capability, and in order to have design capability, we need try and error, accumulation of try and error. And especially for those countries which already passed over around 10,000 and so-called after middle income country, lower threshold of middle income country like Brazil and also including Korea. And if we focus more on the fourth industrial revolution, and in terms of policy, I think kind of policy support to accommodate more creative try and error, such as long-term patient finance from public side might be very important issue. And also public procurement for innovation is another policy dimension. Maybe we need to pay more attention. All those policies not to implement, not to secure the industrial base, but in order to have design capabilities specifically for the fourth industrial revolution, because fourth industrial revolution, every country should start at the same line. There's no benchmarks, the cases up to now. So Brazil, Korea, and US, and maybe all countries are on the same line and on the same starting block. So right now, in terms of policy making, we need more policy to accumulate in a fast way the creative try and error in the fourth industrial revolution. That's my point.
Thank you. Thank you, JD. Kuhn, do you want to add something?
Yeah, some point. First of all, capability is important, but many contexts in the latecomer countries, it takes time to build sufficient level of capabilities, but we still have to make money to success in market. Otherwise, the company cannot survive. They cannot take 10 years, 15 years to build the capabilities. That's why we have to combine not only hard technological innovation, but also business model innovation. You can adopt somebody else's technology and using it in new business model context to keep making money. Otherwise, you cannot survive. That's what's happening most frequently in Chinese context. Like Alibaba, it's same business model as Amazon, but when you try China context, it is some protection. So leapfrogging also should be considered in terms of national context. It should be leapfrogging as long as you try it first in your national context. So that's important in terms of practical or policy consideration. Okay, that's what I want to say at this moment. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Who wants Slavo? You have something? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to comment on few, on few comments. Jan pointed rightly that policy capability are important and they have to be built. But the issue is yet in most of the countries we don't have them and we cannot wait for them. So the issue is how one can think about the policy in the context of weak policy capabilities. I mean, even if everybody takes Korea as a model, but Korea had this policy capability. So in a sense, in that respect, is quite exceptional, the same as China is. But majority of the other countries do not have that. So the issue is how can we think in terms of policy where there are weak policy implementation capabilities? I mean, thinking in terms of best practices completely irrelevant. One can think then in terms of best matches. What are the policy options once you have relatively weak capabilities? And we are here kind of, in the past, we were having this focus on structural reforms like institutions, everything, don't worry, technology will then take care of itself. Now we have this kind of mission state, kind of state will do everything. But obviously the truth is somewhere in between. You need institutional conditions, you need the role of the state, but you also have to combine it with the demand, with the market. How do you then do that in the conditions of weak policy capabilities? How do you use globalization as a kind of lever to do technology upgrading? And this is a kind of $1 million question. But I think very often we are doing mistake by how we frame the problem. And very often I think that the purpose of academic research is not to directly give a solution. We cannot do it, but we can frame the problem. And as long as we legitimize, that these are the kind of issues, policy constraints, then let's think about the solution. But we legitimize and what are the policy possible kind of paths to go out. Then I think that the kind of policy makers will take care as long as they're thinking about the relevant issue. Very often, they are thinking about issues which are not relevant because very often in emerging economies, you will chase new Silicon Valley, R&D driven growth. You are basically forgetting that, as Jong Dong Lee points, that you are deeply into implementation capabilities. That means thinking completely in a different way. So I think our role is basically to frame and to structure the problem. Thank you.
I think we are having a great discussion here. If I wanted to invite the audience to offer questions, both those on YouTube and here on Zoom, they can send us questions, they can type in their questions and we are monitoring, or they can raise their hand. I hope we can see them. I have one question in front of me here. Somebody's asking, he addresses the question more specifically to Professor Lee, Kyun Lee, and he's asking whether we can consider disruptive innovations as leapfrogging. This is the question. Are disruptive innovations leapfrogging, like the example of the digital camera or on film camera? Digital on film compared to film. It comes from the YouTube, I think, the audience on YouTube. Professor Lee, do you want to address this?
Yeah, that's a great example of time to try leapfrogging when there is emergence of disruption in innovation generation. Then often incumbent might stick to old innovation, old product that leaves room for new guys to try these new radically disruptive technologies ahead of incumbent who stay with existing technology. So the camera is a first example of the disruptive innovation and time to try leapfrogging. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So don't try leapfrogging every day, but try when there is a disruption or radical innovation or paradigm shift. That's the way how to improve the chance for success with leapfrogging. Okay. Yeah.
So I wanted to add Kunli's answer. Disruptive innovation, every country wanted to make a kind of another pathway for leapfrogging based on disruptive technology. The digital camera is one very good example, but Brazil or some other developing country wanted to make a leapfrogging based on disruptive technology, but we need to be very careful about the fact that disruptive technology by definition entails a huge risk. So it requires a small betting, a large number of small betting in order to tap into the potential of those kind of disruptive technologies. But quite often in most developing countries, I can see policymakers wanted to make a one-shot, one-kill solution, even though the target is disruptive technology. So there's a big mismatch, very high risk disruptive technology, but from the policymakers' perspective, they wanted to make a one-shot, one-kill success. So we need to be very careful about that. Your microphone is off.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying I want to ask Alessandro Teixeira on whether he has an opinion on this issue.
Well, Nick, I think Professor Jen and Professor Slavo already place well the question. Okay. Unfortunately, many countries today, because it's kind of a buzzword talk about capability. So if you go to, for example, Sub-Saharan Africa, Africa countries, Latin American countries, Asia countries like Malaysia, Thailand, you're going to see that the focus of their policy is innovation. Okay, point. And innovation is building capabilities. But building capabilities, in my opinion, is a long-term process. Okay. And there is some criteria we are talking at national level. Okay. So one of the things that Don mentioned about social control, I mean, institutions needs to be ready to design and implement policies towards building capability. So, and the point that Slavo raised is very much important. The majority, I would say, the countries that I study, they are not ready to design or to implement policies. So those policies that they design and implement, they don't arrive at the sectorial level or the firm level. And then we create a gap on those terms. So I think, again, Slavo is right. Maybe we as academicians, we don't have the answers, but we can frame the problem. Okay, we can frame, this is a long-term process. I think, especially, and I'm puzzled, especially when we are discussing the fourth industrial revolution and the new technologies coming to place. Okay, in my personal opinion, this is gonna increase the gap, not decrease the gap. The chances of leapfrogging, as Kunli is saying, will not be easier because we are based on more science innovation, okay? And this is difficult. This needs investment, this needs organization, okay? Planning, and I'm really not seeing, so countries at the national level, they think that is easy, you know, it's of course, to acquire some technological capabilities or upgrading some part of your industry, you can buy machinery using the purchase power of the government, but this has some limitations, Nick, in terms of what can give you as future in terms of development. So my point here is that, yeah, we need more work to frame this issue, okay? Maybe we don't have the answers, but to frame this issue, that's very, very important. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, very good, very good. We have, this is a very, we touched apparently on a very hot topic here, because there are several questions, several people have sent in comments on the same, how to do these capabilities. And people want to know how. But let me change the tone a little bit. And see, somebody has asked, what is the role of the international environment? They call it international policy. I guess it is whatever the global environment in this particular topic, in enhancing capabilities, right, for developing countries. So how the international plays into this? Open question to anyone.
Yeah, let me say something about that. So we should be, our discussion should involve various dimensions, not only firm level, macro, but also these international dimensions. At the moment, most important international dimension is the US-China, the trade conflict, and coronavirus, and trend of digitalization or Industry 4.0. And these are affecting very importantly the latecomers' chance to build capability or try new business model. For example, now China is seeing some exodus. Many companies are moving out of China. Many Korean companies and Western companies, after this US-China trade conflict, they are getting exit from China. And they're going to where? They're going to Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, and so on. So it's nearshoring, and some are going back to their home country, reshoring. So in the sense, it's a new window opportunity for some latecomers at the level of middle-income countries. So, so in the sense, if we combine these new windows or momentum of disruption with the right policies, you can make up some successful cases. So right now, China, Vietnam is only country who are recording positive growth rate. And Vietnam is great beneficiary of US-China trade conflict and this adjustment of nearshoring or reshoring. Okay. And it's spreading to neighboring Asian countries, Indonesia, Cambodia, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. In fact, just to mention, there is a special issue in the Journal of Technology Transfer that is coming up. I think it is online already, that deals with this topic. It's a very important topic. Anybody else who wants to comment on this? Okay, nobody. I don't see any hands up on the international. How about somebody is asking about whether this whole discussion is very much context and technology dependent, sector dependent. So across sectors there are differences. And we do understand we have the next workshop coming up on December. That's the first thing I will say on sectors. But what can we say about this? I know that several of our panelists have thought about these issues. So the sectoral dimension of creating capabilities, of leapfrogging, of whatnot.
Okay.
Go ahead, Slavo.
Okay, I just want to keep this going and to provoke maybe more. Why we have to talk about the sectors? I mean, in the book, we've given it really great importance. well, it follows from the, let's say, work of Kun Lee and Malherbe about the sectoral catching up. But the reason for me is kind of on a much higher level. Reason is that the capabilities are sector dependent. Kind of talking about the general terms about capabilities, then basically you're talking about everything and nothing. Kind of. The problem is then that these capabilities in sectoral context, one has to take that in a kind of, again, multidimensional way, because there are sectoral specific institutional regimes, there are sectoral specific market issues, technology specificity of that. So the issue is on a sectoral level, that all comes together into the kind of interaction. And even your chapter in the book, let's say on Brazil, on shipyards and that deep drilling shows exactly how market context, institutional context, technology, whether that works or doesn't work. So I think sectoral level is important, because only at that level we can really see how that interaction takes place. Of course, we had today presentation on a macro level, on national level. It doesn't mean that we cannot say anything, but we have lots of insight from that level. But if really want to understand how the catching up takes place, I think we have to go way down. That's why in the book we go also on a micro level and so on. So for me, the reason is simply the complexity of the catching up process, technological, institutional, and market specificity forces you to go to that level. I mean, obviously, conventional economists would say, oh, I can answer perfectly well on my macro level, but from our perspective, we would say, sorry, I mean, you can't say really much relevant to people that you are, analyzing. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me put it this way. Okay, we want to build capabilities, but next question is, which sector first in terms of building capabilities? To which sector first utilize your capabilities? So then comes the issue of entry barriers. All sectors are different in terms of entry barriers and probability for commercial success. So you have to prioritize, or you have to consider sectoral difference in terms of how to utilize where to utilize your capabilities. That's the question as you reach middle income, upper middle income, because you're getting close to frontier, but you're facing more high difficult entry barriers. Not all sectors are same in terms of this aspect. So sectoral choice is very strategic, very important. Otherwise, you will be waste of your capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other comment on this? JD?
Yeah. So the discussion about maybe in the sector, the dimension is closely related to sectoral diversification. So how can one country can diversify from one already incumbent sector to another new sector? In that sense, as Gunni already introduced the concept of intra-sectoral diversification and intersectoral diversification, but I want to also emphasize the concept of diversification based on relatedness. But in terms of the relatedness, we need to have to tell the difference between relatedness in terms of production and relatedness in terms of knowledge. Relatedness in terms of production refers to the relationship across global value chains. So if you are doing some business and then you can do next across the value chains in order to upgrade. But at the same time, if you check the relation in terms of technology or capability, superficially, two sectors may look quite different, but in terms of technology, they maybe looks very close. So, and especially in this first industrial revolution based on big data and AI, seemingly quite distinctive sectors would look more like similar. So even though you are doing in bio, but you can do the basic technology in terms of the big data and AI, that has been trained in biotechnology, but then you can apply to quite different sector. So we need to be more also open to the technology-related, capability-related diversification. That's all.
This last comment reminded me exactly my experience the last 2 days in my classrooms. I have been talking about fintech, right? A detailed description of fintech and what are the forces, innovation and economics and competition and so forth, and a very different sector in our old books, right? Something that looked always very different, pharmaceuticals. So the issue of personalized medicine, the way we are going towards personalized medical care, is actually, if you look at these two very different sectors, right? Always in our discussions, they were far apart. Now they are getting unified because the technologies that support both is AI, very data intensive, high-end computing, right? Because the pharmaceutical companies really need that in order to do the research. It's an amazing thing that we have a convergence, because the background technology, convergence of quite distinct sectors, right? The background technology seems to be the same. So having gone that way, let me I have somebody else who is asking a very interesting question. They worry very much about developing these capabilities that we are talking about, and they ask, in the era of the fourth industrial revolution and all these technologies that underlie the fourth industrial revolution, which tend to change very fast, right? We keep changing, moving very fast. How can countries take this long time, as we say, to develop capabilities? So if things change very fast, and if you are not in control of the change, how can we tell to the different countries around the world that they take time, it will take a long time to develop the capability and so forth? How we can address this? To the whole panel.
So don't waste your money to hardcore innovation. Just pick up some of them, do your own business model innovation. Yeah, that's one solution. Yeah, as I mentioned. Yeah, you don't have to first mover in technological competition, but you can be a first mover in trying new business model, in the applying the new technology from abroad or others in your own context, in your own localities. Yeah. That's the NACOM advantage.
Yeah, for that question, I think our discussant, Alexander, has better answer based on his real experience.
I think if we go back in the work that I have done in terms of capabilities, in the case of developing countries, is that there is different kinds of capabilities, okay? There is, of course, if you're talking about specifically technological capability, it's one thing. But for example, if you're talking adaptation capabilities, okay? And we are talking about, Professor Kirill just mentioned about focus on incremental innovation, okay? Even to have incremental innovation, you need to have at least a minimum level of adaptation to your product to enter your market. So of course, there is some capabilities that countries can develop and can help the companies and the sectors to build and to develop, that doesn't take a long time, but needs action, okay? So I'm giving an example. If you're talking about adaptation, okay, we know it's just to tell the obviously, even to copy, we need a lot of technological capabilities, a lot of adaptation capability, transactional capabilities. There is a bunch of capabilities, but I think the problem is it goes back to the policy instruments and the policy efficiency. So when you're talking about, let me give a practical example. We are talking about design, okay? Let's go back to design. JD just mentioned, is trial and error, and that's true. You know, if you take Nick was talking about pharmaceutical, but let me take a simple industry, okay? We are talking about furniture, you're talking about textile, all are based now in the fourth industrial revolution with technologies that can speed up the process, okay? We are talking about automation, you're talking about artificial intelligence, everything comes to hand, 3D printing, okay? So at least you need to have a minimum level of capabilities to adapt at sectorial level, at the firm level, okay? So instead of trying to reach the sky, okay, as Kun Lee just mentioned, you need to see what you can do, okay, what you can do. So those is the point. I think in the case of design capabilities, technology really helps countries in some sectors to leapfrogging, okay? And I remember, for example, furniture that are based on very, I would say, very important design issues, to design the product, to design the whole value chain, they can help. So my taking on this is basically, okay, there is different sorts of capability, different levels of capability. You don't need to reach the sky, but at least you need to observe and to have some basic capabilities that will allow you to move forward, okay? Allow you to catching up. That's my point, Nick.
Right, very good. Anybody else wants to comment on this? If no,
I think
yeah, somebody.
Yeah. I think another alternative is to look for some potential in your own country's resource-based industries. Like, as I mentioned, the case of Indonesia, there's fishing, but Brazil or Chile, we have a very strong resource advantage in some like some vegetables or fish farming, or some in the case of Malaysia, the oil farming and bio oils. So those are the country specific resources. If you combine that with some new technology, then you have more strong advantages compared to following high-tech trend in IT or some the fancy areas. So that way you can build your own territory-based advantages and combine it with your some level of technology or some business model innovation, then you can make some commercial success. We have to make commercial success. That's the ultimate criteria.
So,
JD.
Sorry, just one comment. We have a large number of groups of countries with quite different distinctive characteristic features, such as the sub-Saharan African countries and least developed Asian countries, or around $10,000 levels of Brazilian-like countries, or big countries. And also, as Gunli already indicated, there are some groups of countries with a good resource basis. So it means our discussion, especially for the practical policy implementation, should be customized to each group, and depending on the level of development. So this might be one idea pops up to my mind, that in the last workshop, we are going to have a policy discussion, and then at the time, why don't we have the policy discussion customized to group of countries, such as depending on the level of development. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And we are reaching close to the end, but there is another question that I have in front of me for a while here. This is from Professor Alves Cherubini, Andre from FGV in Sao Paulo. He is asking, he wants to understand the existing, to what extent implementation capabilities serve as a basis that enable technological and operational innovation. That's the first part of the question. And to what extent operational capabilities hinder innovation later on. That is when you develop operational capabilities and you have your routines, whether these actually hinder innovation to some extent. I think it is related to what we asked before about the speed of innovation, right? But maybe we want to say something about this, the relationship between different kinds of capabilities. Slavo?
Lead territory. I think John knows lead territory.
Yeah.
Other questions.
So I introduced the concept of implementation and versus design capability. But if we take another well-known concept from Insu Kim, from production in production capability, investment capability, and innovation capability, he argues that countries go up the ladder from production, investment, and innovation capability, but it's not an easy, continuous, autonomous process. If quite often, if you are too much successful in production capability, for example, and if you are well trained and then too much customized in building the plant to produce something, then it might be very difficult to think differently. So that's the way why we can see quite often the traps in most developing countries. That's my short question.
I think this is the essence of the question. Maybe Kuhn can tell us something. Kuhn, you have a comment?
No, Slavo, maybe.
Okay, Slavo?
Well, what John Dong is suggesting us is even more demanding. On the management level, there is the notion of the company level of ambidexterity. You take care about the steady state innovation, but then you also watching what are the new trends. So you kind of have a degree of slack in the system. So the idea here, the same would apply on the country level, which poor policymaker, we put him even more into even more difficult position. So my final comment would be, I think that what underline our discussion today is maybe a mistaken belief that there is some enlightened policymaker. Instead of that, I think we have to understand that policy and the catching up is not done only by government. There are regions, there are individual companies, there are industrial associations, chambers of commerce. And in this context, in a broader context, government can be facilitator, not always like my colleague Mariana Mazzucato would say, oh, state-driven mission. Well, fine. In some cases that is possible. In others, it's not. In some other cases, state would do the best just to keep away, not interfere into the activities of potential agents of modernization. So I think we have to go thinking about the policy in a much broader term rather than being focused only on kind of some imagined enlightened policymaker in the government.
Very good. I think we are reaching the end. Perhaps I will ask the different members of the panel to give us a final comment and close this meeting. Slavo, was this your final, or you want to do more?
I think I've talked too much, so this was my final. And Randolph can substitute me because he is here, so he finally did his examination. So.
Okay, if he has...
Me too, I talked too much.
Okay, let's go to Kuhn. Kuhn, do you have any last comment?
No, Jan, you want to say something? I think Jan raised a hand.
Right. Jan, I did see you. Sorry.
I would just like to say that the way the discussion is going, capabilities seems to be associated very much with, manufacturing. And of course, this was how the concept originally emerged and so on. But I think for development, capabilities are really about exploring opportunities and being able to exploit them and develop them. And So especially for poorer countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, I mean, it's not capabilities of implementation in the traditional sense, but it is the ability to build on the implementation of new technology to do new things. And for example, in new energy technologies or new digital technologies, or combining them, this opens up a whole lot of opportunities. And for this, I mean, it's not only a question of production or implementation opportunities and so on, capabilities, but it's also a question of what most Abramovich and we call social capabilities. I mean, the kind of broader social features having to do with skills, having to do with social organization, which very much influences whether such new entrepreneurial ventures based on new technologies will succeed or not.
Very good.
You should know
that. Okay, who else has a final comment? Vitaly?
Thanks. I got a takeaway question, which I will ask at the workshop on the policies, I think. So we were talking about technology capabilities, innovation capabilities, and we formulated this policy capabilities word, which also should have been, let's say, measured and clearly studied, maybe even beyond the set of metrics that Jan has been exploiting in his line of papers on the governance, because it is not only these general governance indicators, but whether the country is able to introduce something sophisticated as technology platforms or some horizontal measures. It really is kind of dependent on the quality of on the policy learning and the policy capabilities, which is even more clear to anybody who ever worked with them. I mean, face to face, trying to explain what exactly are you going to expect, and then trying to fit that into the process of ministers and ministerials government processes. So that's a very important side that I got, that this area of political capabilities.
Okay.
I noticed Bruno raised his hand.
Yeah. Randolph, go ahead. You're back.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry. No, I was kind of trying to take stock of all the very important hints we had during this discussion, and trying to answer the fundamental question of Alessandro, because that's a very, very important question. I mean, what I will say is that we shouldn't make the same mistake of the past, because in the past we were told there were easy fix. Okay, in the past we were told there was sort of institutional transplanting. So look at the best countries and do the same. Okay, we have learned this doesn't work. Okay, so that's a lesson we have to end, but we are still seeing in some instances someone proposing that. And this goes back to one of the Kuhnli points. So for example, if in your own country you have some sectors that are resource-based, so develop in that direction. And if you are not too much sophisticated, that's good. You don't need to enter the race of R&D and etc. if you are not in that type of league, because you will fail. So it's quite important to avoid the kind of temptation to say, oh, Korea then fantastically, let's do exactly like Korea. No, it wouldn't work. But again, as an academics, we can frame the discourse and we can say, no, careful, that's not the direction. The direction is a self-grown type of Danny Roderick, okay? Self-grown discovery. So exploration, try and error, okay? And obviously be ready to fast changes. I understand the need of being sort of building up, but at the same time ready to change course. Ambidexterity is how Slavo phrased it. Yeah, it's what we tell sometimes even our students, and then I conclude, is that they have to be ready for the labor market, and that's apply at the macro level for countries, to be flexible, so to have the capability of flexibility, so not to get kind of rigid and entrained in routines that are eventually going to go away. So to be ready to move and to have the flexible sort of mindset to cope. I know it's not easy to teach that, but that's the mindset countries and policymakers should have.
Very good, thank you. Alessandro, you want to close?
No, I'm fine, Nick. I'm fine.
Good?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
I think we are 10 minutes after the hour, so I think it's time to close this. This is just the first workshop out of 5. I want to invite everybody to follow all 5 workshops. We will have different aspects of this. Next time, which is December 3rd, we will go into sectors, as we just said. The announcement will be out soon, next few days. Thank you for spending 2 hours with us. Thank you very, very much, and look forward to the book, to the forthcoming book. Thank you very, very much.